The year was 1976. In the crushing absolute blackness beneath the Arctic ice, an American submarine was performing the impossible. She was a ghost, a whisper in the deep, shadowing a Soviet ballistic missile submarine with a proximity that defied all logic. The American sonar operators were not just tracking a distant sound signature, they were eavesdropping. Through the dense steel of the target's hull, they could discern the intimate sounds of life and machinery within. The clank of a hatch, a muffled command in the control room, the unique hum of the reactor plant. The Soviet captain, a veteran of the silent service, sailed on in blissful ignorance. His crew moved through their routines, utterly unaware that their every word, every tactical decision, every secret of their vessel was being meticulously recorded by a hunter just a few hundred yards astern. This was the lethal art of the trail. The most dangerous game ever played, where the prize was not victory, but survival. These Soviet submarines, known to their American counterparts as boomers, were the single most critical assets in the nuclear standoff. They were not merely warships, they were instruments of Armageddon. Each one carried between 16 and 20 intercontinental ballistic missiles, crowned with multiple nuclear warheads. A single boomer held the power to erase a dozen American cities from the map. Should the Cold War turn hot, the primary mission of America's attack submarines was stark and absolute: find and destroy these boomers before they could launch. But the ocean is the perfect sanctuary, a vast, three-dimensional wilderness covering 70% of the Earth's surface. Finding a submarine within it is a task of near cosmic improbability. The only solution was to never lose them in the first place. American attack submarines would lie in wait, detecting Soviet boomers as they slipped from their fortified bases, and then latch on for the duration of their patrol. A silent, suffocating partnership that could last for months. The challenge was to remain a phantom while stalking a target engineered for stealth, commanded by men trained to sense the slightest disturbance in their wake. One mistake, a moment of inattention, a piece of equipment emitting an unexpected noise, and the illusion would shatter. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic, ranging from a full-blown diplomatic crisis to sudden, violent combat. Soviet doctrine was unambiguous. Submarine commanders were authorized to attack if they felt threatened. The American submariners understood this reality in their bones. They were hunters, operating under rules of engagement that could turn deadly in a heartbeat. But they were also the prey. The hunt began in the planet's natural choke points. Soviet boomers, departing from their pens on the Kola Peninsula, had to navigate the relatively narrow passages between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. This strategic waterway, the GIUK Gap, was not unguarded. It was wired with a vast, invisible tripwire, an extensive network of underwater listening devices called SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System. These arrays of hydrophones, anchored to the seabed, could detect the acoustic signature of a submarine from over 100 miles away. When SOSUS heard the telltale sound of a Soviet boomer beginning its journey into the Atlantic, the game was on. In the crushing blackness of the deep ocean, where pressure erases all light and sound travels for miles, a faint, rhythmic hum begins to bleed through the silence. It is a mechanical heartbeat where no heart should be. For a hunter lurking in the abyss, this is the first whisper of prey. The signal is relayed, a stream of data passed through the cold, dense water to an American attack submarine, a silent predator on its vigil. The machine awakens. It sprints through the dark, a steel leviathan surging toward a calculated point in the vast emptiness. Then, just as quickly, it falls quiet. Engines throttle down, systems go dormant, and the submarine slows to an ultra-quiet crawl, becoming one with the deep. It waits, listening for the approaching Soviet vessel to cross its path. The initial detection was everything. These operations were a delicate art, governed by one absolute rule: never reveal your own presence. To use active sonar to send out a searching pulse of sound would be a shout in a cathedral of silence. It would instantly betray the hunter's position. Instead, American submarines relied exclusively on passive sonar. They did not search, they listened. They became an ear pressed against the ocean floor, deciphering the noise that every machine unwittingly creates. Every submarine possesses its own acoustic signature, a unique combination of sounds as distinct as a human fingerprint. It is a symphony of machinery: the steady thrum of reactor coolant pumps, the specific whine of reduction gears, the signature cavitation of a propeller slicing through water. American sonar operators were not mere technicians, they were virtuosos of sound, trained to recognize the entire Soviet fleet by its sonic portrait alone. From 5,000 yards away, they could distinguish the deep growl of a Delta-class boomer from the sharper pitch of a Yankee-class. The most gifted among them, the true masters of their craft, could even identify individual submarines within a single class, discerning the subtle, unique flaws and vibrations of one specific vessel's machinery. Once contact was made and the target identified, the true art of the hunt began. The American submarine had to maneuver itself into the most dangerous and advantageous position in the ocean: the baffles. This is the acoustic shadow directly behind the Soviet submarine, a cone of relative silence created by the target's own hull and the thunderous noise of its propellers. Soviet sonar was notoriously deaf in this direction, its own mechanical roar masking any sound from its rear. American captains exploited this blind spot with ruthless precision. They would slip into this shadow, positioning their vessel close enough to maintain a clear sonar picture, yet far enough to evade collision should the Soviet sub make a sudden, unexpected turn. The separation was not measured in miles, but in hundreds of yards. Some of the most daring operations saw a single navigational error, a moment of miscalculation, and two steel leviathans would collide in a catastrophic implosion, vanishing from the world without a trace. To maintain this phantom dance required an almost supernatural level of skill. The American crew had to mirror every move of their quarry. If the Soviet submarine dove deep into the engines, theirs slowed in perfect synchrony. All of this was accomplished in near total silence, with minimal use of active depth controls or propulsion adjustments that could create a detectable sound. For days, sometimes for weeks on end, the entire submarine operated in a state of suspended animation. The crew lived as ghosts within their own ship. Men wore soft-soled shoes, their footsteps muffled against the steel decks. Conversations were held in hushed whispers. Any machinery not absolutely essential to life support and stealth was shut down. Even the galley procedures were altered, the cooks moving with painstaking care to prevent the clang of a pot or pan from becoming a death sentence. The submarine ceased to be a war machine. It became a living organism, holding its breath as it moved through the depths. The intelligence gathered in this silent, terrifying ballet was beyond value. It was the key to understanding the enemy's mind, their patrol routes, their readiness, the operational patterns of their ballistic missile fleet. It was the unseen, unheard, and undeclared war that kept the Cold War from turning hot. And so, deep beneath the waves, far from the eyes of the world, the ghost waits, its ear to the abyss, listening for the next mechanical heartbeat in the dark. In the silent, crushing dark, two leviathans played a game of ghosts. One, a Soviet ballistic missile submarine, a city killer gliding through the abyss, believed it was alone. It was not. Tailing its every move, a shadow made of American steel. A hunter. Its mission was not to attack, not yet. Its mission was to listen, to learn, to become the enemy's echo. Every pulse of the propeller, every hum of the life support, was a word in a secret language. American submarines were recording a dictionary of destruction. The unique acoustic signature of a Soviet boomer at every conceivable speed, at every possible depth. A fingerprint of sound. They mapped the tactical ballet of simulated launch drills. They traced the invisible lines of patrol routes through the world's most contested waters. They measured the precision of its depth-keeping, the character of its every turn. This was more than data. This was a blueprint for annihilation, meticulously assembled by naval intelligence, piece by painstaking piece. An encyclopedia of tactics for the day the world held its breath. For every hour spent in the shadow, the library of secrets grew. But this proximity came at a terrifying cost. The Soviets were not passive prey. They knew they were being hunted, and they had a counter-move. A sudden, violent maneuver known as a clearing turn. The Soviet captain, without warning, would wrench his vessel into a hard bank, plunge it into a deeper, colder layer of the sea, or slam the engines into reverse. A convulsion in the dark. It was a question, screamed into the void, "Are you there?" For the American sonar operators, it was a heart-stopping moment. A sudden spike on a green screen. A change in pitch that meant everything. React too slowly, and the hunter becomes the hunted. React too quickly, and your own noise gives you away. If the Soviet sub turned directly toward them, the game was over. The physics of the deep are unforgiving. Collision was not just a possibility, it was a recurring nightmare made real. There were collisions. Glancing blows in the dark that tore at equipment and nerves. The shriek of metal on metal, a sound that should never be heard hundreds of feet beneath the waves. Some impacts were more severe, forcing damaged submarines into a desperate, emergency apsychological wait. On the American crews was immense, a pressure greater than the sea itself. Months spent in hostile waters, sealed in a metal tube. Every ping on the sonar could be a routine check, or the prelude to war. They were stalking machines that carried enough nuclear fire to scorch civilization from the earth. And they did it in absolute, enforced silence. Sleep was a luxury, rarely afforded and often shattered. Anxiety was a constant companion, a low hum beneath the noise of the reactor and the life support systems. Fear was a contagion that could not be acknowledged, for to speak of it was to show weakness. So, men turned to ritual, to superstition, small routines and private talismans to ward off the crushing stress of a mission they could never discuss, a tension that had no release. The submariners of the Soviet Red Banner Northern Fleet were not oblivious. They were professionals, masters of the deep. Their doctrine was built around detecting and evading these American phantoms. They practiced their clearing turns. They ran silent. They believed in their own invisibility. But the Americans were simply better at the game. Soviet naval intelligence lived with a dangerous illusion. Their estimates suggested American attack subs were successful on perhaps 30, maybe 40% of their patrols. The truth was a strategic catastrophe waiting to happen. The actual number was closer to 80%. A staggering intelligence gap. It meant that for every 10 Soviet boomers that sailed into the Atlantic, believing they were the ultimate stealth weapon, 8 were already in the crosshairs. Soviet commanders sailed with a false confidence, believing they were unheard, unseen. In reality, they were being escorted through their own backyards by an enemy they could not detect. This was the true nature of the Cold War's undersea battlefield. A silent, invisible conflict fought not with torpedoes, but with patience, with skill, with nerve. A war of shadows, where victory was measured in secrets, and the entire fate of the world rested on the ability to remain a perfect, silent echo in the deep. In the crushing blackness of the abyss, there is no peace. Only the constant, gnawing suspicion of being watched. The end of the Cold War was a public spectacle, a celebration of peace. But beneath the waves, the silent war never truly ceased. American submarines continue their vigil, tracking their Russian counterparts through the deep. The political stakes may have shifted, yet the deadly game endures. Modern vessels are phantoms of steel, engineered to be a whisper within the ocean's roar. Their sensors can parse the faintest vibrations across miles of water. The tactics are sharper, honed. But the fundamental challenge is the sound itself is a treacherous, unpredictable variable. And where the smallest mistake can lead to catastrophe? The answer, developed through a generation of perilous operations, is not a technology. It is a discipline. Patience measured in weeks. Skill that borders on instinct. And the chilling willingness to operate in absolute silence, just yards from an adversary who must never know you are there. The men who conducted these missions rarely spoke of their work. Much of what they accomplished remains classified, locked away from public view. Their success, however, gave American strategists a profound confidence that, should nuclear war erupt, Soviet ballistic missile submarines could be neutralized before they ever launched their payloads. That quiet assurance helped maintain the delicate balance of deterrence, the very thing that kept a Cold War from turning hot. The submarines that slipped through dark waters never fired a shot in anger. They won no public victories. But they may have prevented World War III simply by being there. Silent, undetected, a constant, watchful presence in the deep.